Hello and good evening, everyone, and welcome to Hidden Existence. Thank you all for coming tonight. Tonight, my guest is the founder of the ET Newsroom, which is formerly the AMASH project. She is a presenter, a speaker, an author, a therapist, a researcher, and I'm sure there's many other talents to my guest, Joanna Summerscales. Thank you for coming tonight, Joanne.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Daniela, and I hope that the sound's going to be good.
The sound's good so far, yeah. So let's start with how you got to the AMASH project, which is now the ET, but how you got to there from wherever you were.
Well, I did. So it's an interesting question because there isn't ever, for me, there isn't a kind of aha moment or a moment when I went, that's what I'm doing, except, of course, there comes a point when you actually action something. But sort of from the get-go, I've kind of been interested in most things that are, I don't know, like spiritually aware, consciousness, ghosty stuff, paranormal. Not so much the ET stuff, actually. That's an interesting one. But certainly my early years, so trained initially with in theatre and some TV stuff, mainly production, but also front, camera stuff. Actually preferred doing the behind camera stuff and getting stuff organized. So went in that direction. And in between times, I've got disability in my family, and which is continuing. And I was very interested in some of the mechanics of how, health and wellness works. So I worked on regression. I'm a regression therapist, and I might these days call it quantum healing with a bias on regression, because the story, that is the regression point, the historical narrative, if you like, it isn't always required. Sometimes it's the energetic imprint, and you can just deal with that as opposed to telling the person having the story unfold. And sometimes that is easier for people to handle, but that's not down to me. That's down to the person and what they feel they need. And it's not even a conscious choice. It's something that just comes up as a point of reference for them rather than the narrative. So it's interesting how even that process has changed for people going through it. For myself, obviously, I've been through regression therapy many times in my training and stuff. And, I've had some interesting things come from that. And also I was invited so many years ago to sit in a circle. And I don't know if people know what I mean by that, but it's a psychic development circle. And maybe it's an old-fashioned thing now. I don't know, really. But I was living in London. I'm currently on the southeast coast, which is toward Hastings. So I spent 5 years with at the Spiritualist HQ in Belgrave Square. And I think his name was Richard Dancer, if I remember correctly. So I worked there. I was part of that group for 5 years, but it was an open group, and it was very interesting during both those training kind of environments as well as participatory environments. What I learned is that you do have to be really careful, because I experienced firsthand, how shall I say, backdoor incursion, black magic kind of stuff, psychic attack, quite early on in my meditation work, which was part of the, just me setting the course of, how I was going to develop as a human being, soul, whatever you want to call whatever we are here. And so I had some early grounding in how to deal with fairly intense psychic attack. And so, you wonder what that is. And some people who have a religious orientation might say, oh, it'd be demons or whatever. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't very nice. And one of them was at least life-threatening, in my opinion. and I'm here to tell that tale, so it obviously didn't win out there. But so what I learned about that, and the reason I'm mentioning that and flagging it up, because it's very interesting, because there's a lot of interest in this field, and that's normal because we have these other facets to our nature, but we're not really taught much about protection. Sounds an awful word, really. It sounds a bit of a clumsy word, but we're not given any tools with which to counter anything coming in. And the worst case scenario of all of that is mental health issues of a very severe nature, requiring psychiatric input sometimes for life. And that is, no joke. Yeah. So, I mean, that is, I said, that's an extreme level, and I have not encountered that. But, it is something to be aware of and respectful of. And it's not to be scaremongering about any of this. It's just, it goes with the territory. And sometimes when you start shining your light brighter out there, it's seen further by more. And sometimes that's fantastic and that's great. And it can be. There's nothing wrong with that either. But sometimes it also attracts the other parties who go, "Ooh, that looks interesting. Let's see if we can have a bit of that." Yeah. So, and it can deflect you, and it can cause, depending on your psychological, personal makeup. And that's just, we're all different. We're all just who we are. And if you're really a sensitive person, and a lot of people are, and especially now we've got new energies coming onto the planet and all that, it's throwing people open and sometimes through a bit of a loop. And some people are at a loss to know what to do with that and how to deal with their changing feelings and mental aspects as well. So it's a kind of an all-round thing. And then from that sort of scenario, I have a group of friends who are very interested in all this stuff as well. I'm kind of lucky enough to have attracted those into my life from the get-go, really, who've been with, seeing me through my life. And they had people in their lives who had ET experiences and that sort of thing. And that's kind of where I came into the awareness that, oh, this is really something more than, the lights in the sky. And then I met a lovely guy called Sixto Paswells. He's an American Peruvian contactee. I don't know whether many people have heard of him. He is well known in the world. He was, I think, the founder, if not the co-founder, of Mission Rama. And that's a group really focusing on the positive love aspect. It's a very spiritually orientated group that work with the highest facet of themselves to attract in then and communicate with other intelligences, other planetary intelligences, Earth, perhaps, who knows. And so I met Sixto and ended up interviewing him a few times across my friend's kitchen table. And, what a great guy. He was just a lovely human being, just telling a story, sharing what he truly believed he had to, and still does to this day. And Sixto's story is quite interesting in and of itself. But maybe if there's time to touch into that, we can do. But just to carry on with my history, if you like, and really sort of, so I also teach. I went, because I'd been teaching healing and teaching my sort of stress management and that kind of thing, and meditation groups. I did a teacher's certification just so I could see where I was compared to, say, the national curriculum process. Anyway, I was pretty much on spec with how they did things, and maybe just added a handout or two. So it's sharing that stuff, and because health and wellness, especially with the disability in my family, I have a sister with multiple sclerosis, and so we tried everything. And because she went through things, I went through things, and through that I became a real exponent of H2O2, which is hydrogen peroxide, food grade, I may say. And yes, it is a bleach. And no, it is not the same one that you put on your hair, the food grade one. Well, I wouldn't want to do that anyway. But for many years, I've been using that. And the way I take it is just a few drops in a, say, 50 or 100 ml little bottle, and honest to God, that has kept so many bugs and stuff away and kept me in wellness more often than not.
Wow.
There have been occasions when I've hit the deck, but one occasion was a psychic attack seeding my field, which is very interesting. It was interesting to experience, not interesting to go through. That was pretty dire, but you know, you have to roll with the kind of psychic punches and also the material ones, because I know that there's always those around who just can't accept, you know, where you are, for whatever that is, you know, and good for them. That's their path. But it's interesting how, because I was flagging up a lot of complementary alternative processes, you know, everything from kinesiology to Reiki. I'm not a Reiki practitioner, but friends are, but healing, I've done a lot of work on that. And my system, and I work with a system of crystals called electrocrystal therapy, which is, I don't know if there's a guy who is working with that. Is a guy called Harry Oldfield, and he did a lot of work with Kirlian photographs, and it's very interesting because in the courses that I did, which was many years ago again, but I think he's still doing something similar. He was showing the Kirlian photographs, say, for example, of a bowl of cornflakes. And you may think, for goodness sake, why? It doesn't sound too interesting. And then a bowl of muesli. And the light coming off the muesli was like a blast. And that from the sunshine breakfast, Kellogg's, was like a pinprick. So it just goes to show you that the energetic quality of these things that we put in us and have around us, they can be photographed and measured and shown in, you know, as a real thing, as opposed to, well, that's just your idea of things. You know what I mean? So also saw, you know, a young child who was obviously in need of healing. All we were seeing in these Kirlian photographs were the outline of, say, the thing, the hand, the object. So we saw the outline of obviously a child's hand, and then she was in the vicinity, if not sitting next to a healer. And even without the healer trying, you could see the arcing energy of the healer's compassion and healing energy going into the child because of this wanting to support and help. So you can see, you know, you could see materially in a picture, in a photograph, that this stuff works. And sometimes when we don't feel the effect of it, we can wonder, but sometimes it's a bit like a homeopathic remedy. It can actually kick in a little bit later on. And also because it's changing your frequency and vibration, again, augmenting it, bringing in, you know, other things and other people into your environment, which you may never have thought about being an effect of a healing experience. So it's not just one thing, and it doesn't affect just one layer of you. So healing and interest in health and wellness was a big passion of mine. And for 5 years down in Hastings, I put on a complimentary healthcare show with a couple of healthcare professionals, and we did that. And as I said, for 5 years, and it was basically giving people, the public, taster sessions of things like shiatsu, you know, aromatherapy, and also we had doctors and other healthcare professionals in the field who actually, like GPs, who were brave enough to come and speak and tell us about their experience of giving an idea of a different way than just medication. And so that, you know, that was fantastic. And we had a guy who's sadly gone now, Sir Peter Guy Manners, who was a great exponent of cymatics, which is sound in healing. Absolutely fascinating stuff. So I kind of got a very broad background. And then bit by bit, my attention was drawn further into and meeting people who'd had experiences. And then I really felt that, and having heard that there weren't too many places for people to go and share this material with and feel secure and not feel, you know, insecure with you know, trusting people and all the rest of that. So I just decided that, you know, we could do with a secure platform. And what I meant by that was that somebody, if they wanted to speak to someone, i.e. me, they would be met with non-judgmental, you know, openness, and they could go on camera and speak about their experiences, which I did. I encourage people to do, simply because the more people are out there sharing, the more it's spoken of and the less the lid is kept on this material. And some of it is so important. And you know, I started the AMASH project, and AMASH, the word AMASH stands for anomalous mind management, because there's a lot of mind control going on in a lot of different conditions around the planet. Abductee, contactee, helpline, because I provide a helpline. And BUFOG, the Birmingham UFO group, also provided I don't know if they still do actually, a chat. Sorry, I'm trying to think of what he called it. Anyway, a chat. I think it was a monthly chat for experiences, and I don't know, as I say, if that's still going on. But when I decided to start the MASH project, had Dave along with me, a guy called David Griffin, and a guy called Miles Johnston, and you know, that was just the beginning. And it was very interesting, because this was for, you know, really a UK orientation, because there's lots in America, but there wasn't too much, well, hardly anything here. So, but the interesting thing is, I started getting calls from all over the world, actually. And I was surprised at that as the interviews went out. And I guess it was just a timing thing. Maybe it just resonated with a lot of people. And, you know, there's lots of people that called and said, I can't, you know, this isn't going public. And, you know, of course, that's absolutely fine. And others that were, you know, would let me share their story verbally, myself, and others who would be brave enough to come on camera. And I understand, you know, why not? Because people have lost their businesses, their you know, family. I mean, sometimes all the family, because they, you know, did not, you know, back down from saying what had happened to them. And sometimes that situation was maintained. You know, there was no going back for either party. And, you know, that's a tragedy. It really is a tragedy, because we can learn so much. And it's not about sort of, somebody said, oh, do you believe everything that everybody says? I said, it's not about believing everything everybody says. It's about giving a window, giving an opportunity for another human being to share what, you know, has been for them a reality. And that is their reality. It's not my reality, but it doesn't mean that I can't meet them there and discuss that, because I truly believe that what is going on, there seems to be either more revealing, more sharing, or there's more going on the planet by way of contact. I think people feel a bit more confident to some extent in coming forward. The ridicule is still there all over the place, you know, in the mainstream and on the high street.
Yeah, it's same with the BIGFOOT subject and all that goes with it. There's people still laughing about it, but this thing's out there, and there's so many people having experiences. It can't just be made up. You know, it can't just be.
Yeah.
And I've noticed though with the alien, the contactee encounters, that they're so hard. I can't imagine trying to explain some of those to a friend or family member, because some of them are so bizarre as well, and especially the loss of time. Must be really hard to get your head round what's happened, you know. I think you've just frozen up.
Oh, you there?
You're back. You're back.
Yeah, hooray! I think it is. I think it is really, really hard, and I think that the BIGFOOT, the Sasquatch stuff is absolutely amazing, and I absolutely, I just absolutely believe that is, you know, another kind of being on the planet, and it's, you know, yeah. I was going to mention something else about another thing that came up, but just to round up from the AMASH project. In 2012, I was approached by a company called Off the Fence Productions, really lovely people. and they pitched me to for them to do a project on the IMASH project, a documentary on the IMASH project, which happened, unfortunately. And they promised me integrity. I mean, people have heard me speak about this before, but you know, I'll just mention it because it's interesting to see how things pan out, even with the best will in the world. And you know, and I'm quite you know, I'm quite tough about, you know, what's going to be okay and what's not going to be okay, and what I'll allow. And I was told in no uncertain terms that the integrity would be maintained, blah, blah. Anyway, what they could not maintain was the integrity of Channel 4. Channel 4 had zero integrity when it came to doing this project, because they needed a partner to get this program out there, and it turned out to be Channel 4. And oh my God, it was just shocking. They absolutely blitzed it. It was called Confessions of an Alien Abductee. It was meant to be about the work of the IMASH project and the people who've passed through the doors to some extent. And, you know, they did a lot of damage. And of course, that's what they intended to do. But unfortunately, by the time I knew that that was going to be the case, we were sewn in and there was no way out. And the people at Off the Fence Productions, I'll just say that I do believe that they were absolutely real and honest in their, you know, assertion of integrity, but their hands were tied and they could do nothing about it. And they had to let that ball run. I think it was a very hard lesson for everybody, because they really were nice people. And I don't really hold them accountable, because they're just a young company, you know, thinking that this was a great shot. And anyway, you know, so good for you, Channel 4, you know. And actually, I know that the program has bombed and it's not selling anywhere. So, you know, they've shot themselves in the foot, because had they made something really brilliant, really honest, they would have had a show that would have sold for years and years and years, because it would have shown, you know, the integrity. And anyway, that's that. So, but yeah, that was a hard lesson. That was a hard lesson, and I came away with a very bloody nose from that, because I was attacked roundly for and the fault was laying and at my door for that. And you know, hey ho, it is what it is. You know, you do the best you can, and sometimes it doesn't work out. But kind
of think as well, though, you know, trying to play this out to the mainstream, and those who are watching just the mainstream stuff are not going to get their heads around it. It's just, you know, a small fish in a massive ocean, I think, of what's put out there, unfortunately. But I think, you know, what we're doing now, and these live shows and talking to people and connecting more, is getting this out. So it may be in a more organic fashion than.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's great. I think it's absolutely lovely. I mean, I had my own show, the IMASH Files, for about 16 months or so before I had to close that down. I had to close the IMASH project down because it was hacked to Hades with porn. And that's just so somebody did not want me out there doing the IMASH project. But I chose the ET Newsroom as a title, or as a name, simply because it was quick. Think of something. I've got to do this now. I've got to have somewhere to put all this material, because I was about to lose all the material from the website, and we managed to save it. And you know, Tony Hurst, thank you very much always for that. The website still needs updating from then, but we still save most of the material. So that's how the ET Newsroom was born. And it's interesting. So it's going to give me a wider remit. And I've really, for the last, since, so the IMASH project was closed in at the end of 2015. So beginning of 2016 was the ET Newsroom. And in between times, I published the book. I don't know if you can see that behind me. This is an amazing story. This is, I don't know if you can see that. Oh, the light's on it. But the story of Bill Brooks. And this is, he's a British guy. He was a musician. Oh, you've gone. Oh, there you go.
I've got it up for you.
Sorry.
I've got the image more to show it.
I was just going to say, and this is interesting, talking about people coming forward. Bill Brooks came forward in 2012, having had a week of heart attacks and strokes, and honestly not believing he was going to make any years. To my knowledge, he's still around, but and he'd had nearly 20 years since his the year 44 is when he had an incredible download of information. And this was a guy, for those who haven't heard anything about this, who from the Black Country in England, which is near Birmingham, Stourbridge, it would be the main town, and Wordsley would be one of the villages.
Can I just ask, for anybody who doesn't know, can you explain what a download means? Because that word's used quite a lot in this subject, but what does it actually mean? What's it about?
Well, you know how you upload things to the net and then you download them onto your computer? It's the same difference. It just goes straight into your brain. So something was downloaded into him. So something was delivered into his mind, and what was delivered or given or it was really like a download. It's really like a program going.
Okay. Oh, you've frozen up. Well, we'll wait for Joanna to come back. Marianne, is this the stuff that Joanna was talking about? Tell me in the comments. I'll just put this book cover up again, and also I've put Joanna's links in the description. This is the book Joanna's written. I think she was just going to tell us all about it. Hopefully we'll get her back. I actually discovered Joanne quite a few months ago, and I'll put that link up actually in the description of a talk she did somewhere, and I was just fascinated about the stuff she was talking about. Oh, and she has gone. Hopefully she'll come back soon. Well, this is funny because I've never been on my own before. Oh, she's back.
Am I back? I actually saw a picture of myself speaking. I was speaking, and then I heard you say, "Oh, she's gone," and I thought, "Oh, you can't hear me." Oh, sorry. Isn't it a nuisance?
Okay, that's fine. So, okay. So the download is something that's coming down.
The download is just an information drop.
Okay.
It's a data dump, if that makes any better sense. It's just a whole pile of information. And it's just delivered, and the download word really means it's done in one fell swoop. It's not delivered over months, not delivered over days or an hour. It's like, and there you go. And you hear this being mentioned in contactee, abductee stories time and again. And what was interesting about Bill is that this was a guy who didn't believe in this stuff for 44 years. And he just thought people like you and I were just fruitcakes. I mean, he said that. He said, you wouldn't have liked me before, Joanne. But imagine what that does to you, though. I mean, we can laugh about that, but imagine being somebody like that. And we perhaps know people who are a bit locked out, as I might say, to anything outside the physical. And this guy didn't have much education, actually no education at all. So he sort of grew up as a country guy, nature boy, fighting his own corner all the time. So life was a bit tough, and life was quite impoverished in lots of ways, and really had a lot of challenges. And he'd been taken since he was about 2. And he didn't believe it. He even came home from the army one day, and he'd got a severely disabled brother. Now, his brother wasn't mentally disabled, but physically disabled. And now and again, they'd share a bedroom as kids. And when he came home from the army this one time, his brother was there showing him books with pictures of aliens in. And so, and this would have been around about 1976. So, and his brother was really frustrated, or 74 even. His brother was really frustrated with him because Bill just thought, well, the guy's obviously lost it. Whatever, that physical disability has gone to his brain. I mean, that's how he thought. I mean, you can't get your head around that's how he could possibly think, but he did. And that actually caused a falling out between the brothers, because what we think is that his brother used to see him being taken when they were, in fact, his brother on his deathbed, which only was 6 months before Bill had his download, actually accused Bill in fury of being part of them. And
Right.
Bill hadn't woken up then, hadn't had the download. He didn't know what he was talking about. He was poor thing. I mean, it was like talking a foreign language to him. He didn't know what he was on about. And he was really quite distressed himself because he, honest to God, did not know. And then when he had this download, this data dump, he saw his entire life. It's a little bit like people talk about a near-death experience and how they see their whole life like a movie. And suddenly and not only do they see it, they feel it, and they feel the other person and all the rest of that. Well, that's what happened to him. Because I guess someone like Bill, you'd have to rub his face in it for him to actually believe it. And,
So
he saw
a memory download of things that have happened that have been cancelled out initially, and then suddenly okay.
So we don't know why, and they do this a lot, and they being whoever they are, because there's lots of different theys, seem to mind control the experiences a lot. Now, why they would mind control Bill for 44 years and then decide at that age, okay, the guy's ready, let's get him now. I mean, the guy spent 2 years in trauma. I mean, he was traumatized anyway, but he was traumatized for 2 years. I mean, he drank himself stupid. He thought he'd lost his mind. He thought he was having a breakdown. And I'm sure many other people have felt similar things as well. Well, I know they have. But he went and did it all. He went and did all the drinking. He went and did the, crazy stuff. It ruined his marriage. Nothing worked. Because he couldn't wrap his head around. And the interesting thing is that what he said about this, so this is like 44 years of memories, right? 44 years. Because in his normal everyday life, of course he could remember things, but he'd have anomalous things happen to him, say at work. He ended up working as a professional musician, but when he came out of the army, but before that, in between, whilst he was getting himself established and before he knew that was what he was going to be doing, he did odd jobs, and one of them was driving. And this one time, it was an overnight job. He knew he had a delivery and it would go Southampton and then Evesham, which is near Oxford and Worcester. So he went off, picked up the van on a Monday morning, went and delivered by the late afternoon to Southampton. And anyway, we had a massive event that night, abduction event as it happens. And then the next, so he suddenly doesn't remember it either. There he is in the morning, no memory of it, finds himself outside the van thinking, oh God, that's really weird. I must need a pee, because he'd slept overnight in the van, or that's what the plan was. And then he saw the cow by the van, which he'd actually seen being taken up, which he thought, well, that's a bit weird. I wonder what farmers are doing lifting cows up in the night. I mean, you've got to love him. I said, really? He said, well, I don't know what farmers do with the cows. And fair enough. Look, he said, I'm not a farmer. I just love it. And you think, well, it's perfectly logical. Why should he know? He's not a farmer guy.
But he's just trying to make sense of somehow.
No. Here, you have to have the scene in your mind. He's in a dirt track road. He's just parked up to Kip overnight, and he's parked and he's done that so he doesn't have so far to go in the morning, which is nearer where his base for work is. And he's just got himself some fish and chips, having a fag, having a cup of coffee, having a smoke, all that, and nothing happens. And so he's seeing this stuff go on, but he doesn't know what he's seeing. He's looking at all these lights that he thinks are Evesham. In the morning, when he looks, and during the time that he remembers, 44, well, many years later, another 10 or so years later, he realizes those weren't lights over Evesham. That was some kind of freaking mothership, because it was in Hormuz. And anyway, so the poor thing, so cut a long story short, he goes back to the depot, having done now the delivery of the day, having seen the cow being mutilated, as we hear about the mutilations, the laser precision stuff and all that. And he legs it thinking, oh my God, someone's going to think I killed a cow. Well, why would they think that? You know, but anyway, so he legs it, being absolutely terrified, goes and does the last unloading of the job, goes back to the office, and they go, well, what the hell are you doing here? And he goes, what are you talking about? I finished the job. He went, oh, yes, Superman. And he goes, what are you talking about? He said, look, so he left on Monday. That's right. So this should be Tuesday for him. They said, well, it's Monday, you know, because it is a 2-day job. There's no way you could do it in one day. It's Monday. And he goes, get out of here. It's Tuesday. I picked up he said, look, yeah, the boss goes, or the boss standing goes, it's, you know, we don't work on a Sunday. Yesterday was Sunday. And he goes, look, something's flipping wrong here. And then he goes, just a minute. This is the boss man. I'm going to ring the Southampton depot. I'll soon find out what's going on there. And I think it was Southampton, anyway, whichever one it was, whichever depot. He rings it and he comes back in, having, you know, being eyeballing Bill throughout the call. And he goes, you've got your brother working for you, haven't you? Well, Bill only has one brother, and that's the disabled one, and he definitely couldn't work. And he goes, well, I don't know what you're talking about. The guy goes, go on. He said, there's somebody looking exactly like you finishing off that delivery.
Wow.
So we're on Monday. So you tell me what's happened. So, and then get this. I mean, imagine that messing with your head. And it messes with everybody else's head too, because they're all on Monday. He's on Tuesday. And they're laughing. They're calling him Superman. And he actually did ring the secretary some years later. And she remembered. She said, oh, you're the missing time. You're the guy with the missing time. And she remembered. And I wish he would have kept that contact until we wrote the book, but he didn't. But, you know, that was validation for him after he found out what had gone on. And then he goes home, and his wife had arranged to go out with her sister for the night, Monday night. Not the Tuesday night, because then hubby would be home. And not that it was a big deal, but so he goes home and she's getting ready to go out. He said, well, where are you going? She said, well, it's Monday. I told you I'm going out. He said, don't you start. And then so she goes out, and one of the problems he had regularly was, and you do hear abductees talking about this, especially those who've got implants up this neck of the woods. And he had terrible sinuses. So he did a yogic practice, was to put water up and bring water out, clear the cavities, all that. So he did that. But what came out was an implant. Right. And then if that one wasn't enough, he was having I don't know if he was eating at the time. I can't remember now without reading the book again. But one came out of, he actually said, I feel that it came out sort of the back of my throat. But I want to say it was sort of from you know, the jaw somewhere, like a tooth. And he just thought he'd lost a filling. Well, he said, the only filling I ever had was given to me in the army. He said, my teeth were perfect then. And he was also a victim of Porton Down experimentation in 1968. And we now know that is a fact, that Porton Down did do that. And Porton Down have been known to recompense people for the experimentation they did on them. But anyway, that's another story. Yeah. I mean, 44 is an astonishing read, you know, and the thing is, it's an English tale, but it does involve Area 51. I mean, it is just kind of off the charts. So that's what I did in 2016. It took me about 4 years working with Bill from about 2012, because he's quite dyslexic, and also as we were working, which was mainly by Skype and phone, I mean, I did meet him, and I did several road trips, did all the road trips to all the major events and situations and locations that happened, that he experienced. So I've been to those places, and honest to God, they're so ordinary. And you might say, well, what a funny thing to say. But that is exactly the point. There's nothing out of the ordinary about the locations, about the person, or is there? what is there about Bill that had him singled out from childhood? Why was it him? That's what I want to know. Who knew about that? And I'll just give you one other little story about Bill as a child, just because maybe scratch your heads with this one. So he's in the Stourbridge, Wordsley area. There's another little village up there with a W. I forget what it is without looking it up at the moment. Anyway, they're all very close by. Because of his, in that era, so Bill was born in 1950, and I can't remember how many years his brother would have been born after him. Maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6. Anyway, it meant that mainly the hospitals wanted mum to let the baby die because of his incredible physical complications. And basically mum was never going to do that. So he lived till he was about 34. So she did a fabulous job. Wow. And he even married. So good for, amazing. Anyway, so during his young years, he needed a lot of medicaments, a lot of dressings and stuff. And so Bill now and again would be sent down the road to get them, which happened on this occasion. And Bill was quite a loner. He really didn't go to school. It's just the way things worked out. And his dad worked away quite often. And so it's just him, his little sister, mum, and then his disabled brother. So this one day, and his parents were a little bit concerned about him being a loner. And so this one day he's off down the town getting whatever mum needs, and he's approached by a man in black. And this really is, an American gentleman, trilby, the long hair. And you may think, well, maybe in 1959, that's not such an unusual outfit. And it wasn't the Spooky Men in Black. It was a person, and basically suggested that he might like to join a group where, like a youth club. And that if he'd like to do that, he could, come with him home and talk to his parents, see if his parents would allow that. And actually, that's what happened. And the parents thought, well, that's a good idea because he was such a loner, all that. So this guy then took him to a club called I think it was the Royal Order of the Antediluvian Buffalo. No, I've got that slightly wrong. Something about the Antediluvian Buffalo is a Mormon thing, actually. I must write that out for myself because I've read it and written it so many times over the years. I've forgotten it for this minute. But anyway, basically what this guy said to him was, you're a bit young for us. And the us were Rosicrucians. Right. So he said, but, you'll stay with these guys and I'll come and get you when you're old enough, kind of thing. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. So I said to Bill, well, okay, that's really fascinating. What did you guys do? He said, oh, well, it was actually really great. We played baseball. I learned about that. That was really good. I really enjoyed that. And then he said, but when the weather wasn't very good, we were inside and we were doing kind of mind games. And I said, oh, okay, what kind of mind games would they be? He said, oh, like trying to make things move with your mind and telepathy. Wow. Yeah, indeed. I mean, you wouldn't think that in little old Stourbridge or Worsley or wherever that was, they'd be doing that in 1959 or any time, with a kids group. Yeah. This is a kids group. Anyway, Bill at that time had developed a penchant for smoking and they didn't like it. And Bill being Bill, he's a will of steel, said, well, that's it then, I'm off, thanks. So it lasted about 3 months. But then what's very interesting following on from that, and we don't know whether it's 1959 or 1960. Then I'll finish with the Bill stories. I mean, there's 100 to tell, but I'll finish with this one. We can talk a bit more about any other thing that you want to get word in edgeways. Bill was tasked with kind of looking after the house and his little sister, because mum would be looking after his brother at the hospital often. Dad would be away, so he had to take his sister to school and then had to make her tea. So in between times, he'd go down to this field, which I've been to, and it's now a public, quite well-used dog walking place by the canal, and it's lovely. And I find it hard to believe that back in 1959, maybe 58 and earlier, it was just put to crop. We think it might have been corn. We don't actually know, but we'll say a tall crop anyway. So we imagine it's corn. And that it was remote. People didn't go there. In fact, he said people could, you could go there. It was his secret place, and you wouldn't see people for months, sometimes, weeks and months. Anyway, so that's how remote it was, or unused. So this one day, the crop's up, and his dad would say to him, look, honest to God, you are going to get killed or injured if you keep lying down in the crop, because a combine harvester is going to come along and mash you up. Anyway, Bill being Bill, he just carried on regardless, and made his bed in the crop and lay down, and he'd have the animals. He had an incredible affinity with animals, and animals would just be drawn to him, especially if they needed a bit of healing. It's not something he's ever spoken about very much, but he said he could hold his arm out and birds would just come and land on them. So, he must have some extraordinary qualities in those other areas that are more subtle to us. So anyway, so he's just lied down in the crop circle. And one of the things that the kids used to do to entertain themselves in those days was to write on balloons their name and address, to try and get a new pen pal, and hope to release these balloons and hope they'd make it to France, and so they'd have a pen pal in France or wherever. Anyway, so the reason I'm telling you that is because what happened next made him think of the balloons, except these weren't balloons, these were vast. He began just right over where he was, and I don't think it was much more than a good few feet above him, but not many feet above him. This white sphere was there, and he said it was big, maybe 8 foot across, and that's huge. Was rotating, and he thought, "Oh my God, never seen anything like that before." But he thought about the balloons and thought, "Well, that doesn't look like a balloon." And then another one came and joined it, and then they were spinning around each other, and then suddenly they zipped off. And as they did that, he thought, well, where have they gone? And he stood up, and it was clear to me from his description that it was a crop circle now that he was standing up in. Wow. Because back in 1959 or 1960, I don't think they were known of so much, and certainly people didn't really talk about them. And in the further field, he could see a craft, and he didn't recognize the craft, but he thought, well, that's different. And he could see a party of 4 walking toward him, and it looked like a family. Anyway, when they got to him, they had some conversation. And one of the things they asked him, actually, the first thing out of their mouths, I think, as far as he can remember, is he said they almost seemed a little bit anxious. And they asked him if he'd seen any reptilians, or he said it might have been reptiles. He said, I can't actually remember the word they used, but something like that. Well, he didn't even really know what they meant by that. The only thing, he said no, because he knew that area like the back of his hand, and he knew everything that was there. And so he just said he knew that there was. I don't know if you can still hear me. Oh, then they asked him if he could help, and he said yes, of course. And then he said, well, what do you want me to do? They said, you'll know at the time. He still doesn't know what that is. But then they asked if he'd like to go for a ride, and of course you can imagine any small boy would say yes. And I said, didn't you think that was a bit kind of weird or anything unusual about it? He went, no, he said, I'd just seen Flash Gordon at the cinema and I believed it all. I think that's great, don't you? It's so sweet. I mean, that's a child for you, They suspend belief, don't they, or disbelief. Anyway, so off he went, and he did have a ride. But the reason I mentioned this as well, especially in relation to thinking about what they did at the Antediluvian Buffalo Place Club for Kids, was he was left with the 2 kids, and they were making a sphere or ball move up and down in the air at their will, or at will. And they said to him, go on, you can do it as well. And he said, oh, no, I can't. And they said, go on, try. And he did try, and he did do it. He said, but I believe that they did it for me because I can't do it now. So then Mum and Dad called him over, and they showed him, and Dad was explaining to him the propulsion system. He didn't know what was said about that, but what they what was shown him was a plinth, which is about 5 foot and about another 1.5 foot, or 4.5 foot, another 1.5 foot of a kind of cake dome thing, which was clear, and underneath within that was something that looked like a child's spinning top. And he said, and as it was spinning, he said the craft moved, and as it spun out of view, the craft went very fast indeed, and he could actually see there was a porthole, round porthole, and he could see the earth receding at a rate of knots through the porthole. And then as they were going, he was having a great time. And as they were moving, he could see that, I'll call her mum, gave a look to dad, which, said, I think we should, we need to take him back. And she said that, and they took him back. Now, he'd gone there to this place on that day after dropping his sister off by bicycle. He got a bike, which, was a kind of a big deal. Anyway, he went back because he knew that he was going to be late for his sister if he didn't get a lick on, the old wiggle going, and but no bike. And he thought, oh my God. And he thought, well, no one could have stolen it. Nobody was there. Anyway, he's really anxious, and he's about to go, and he turns around and he sees the space people, as he calls them, and they've got his bike. He doesn't know why they've got his bike, how they've got his bike, but they give him his bike. And he goes and he says, well, will I see you again? And they say, yes, look to the clouds. So he'd been looking to the clouds a lot, but he hasn't seen them again. Wow. So that was a very, interesting childhood experience. And he's had many, and plenty as an adult too. But, it is very interesting. So when Bill contacted me, he was a person who'd been ridiculed, he'd been marginalized, he'd had a horrible time. He'd had one researcher who had been scared off because and had a lot of work taken, I guess because of what work he was doing. And it was kind of interesting. So he was really, really nervous about this book coming out. And that's why the name is what it is, and why we've written it as based on. It is based on, but it is. There's every word of that book is true. There is nothing that is fictionalized in any sense. The only thing that I've done is edited out some of the military stuff, and that's not changed anything. It's just there was quite a bit of it, and some of it was a bit, it wasn't didn't add to the story, and it was just general military stuff. So, but the interesting military stuff is definitely in there. So that's why I'm fascinated by all of this, these incredible stories. I mean, what a privilege to hear it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. These implants, did he ever get them looked at, blown up, or did he keep them?
Well, this is very interesting, and interesting that you should ask. So the one that came out of his nose, he thought, he was in the bathroom at the time, and he consciously put it into a soap dish on top of the bathroom cabinet, and thought, he was absolutely tired out, thought, I'll look at that in the morning. I'm going to rest now, have a drink, put my feet up. And the one that came out of his mouth, he just chucked it into the bin. See, you have to remember, he wasn't awake. He wasn't wakened. He just thought this was whatever. And he really thought that the thing that came out of his mouth was a filling, except it wasn't. And that he actually went for a dental appointment. But I won't bore you with that. You can read about it if you're interested. And but so his wife comes back. She's had a great time. They go off to bed. They go to sleep. And he said, our bedroom was on the ground floor, and we had French doors, and that went onto a garden, so we could see. And I can't remember if he said the curtains were open, but anyway, he could see the garden. And he said suddenly there was a lot of light coming in, and he could see. He actually saw these greys, for want of a better term, greys. Saw one or two in the garden. And the next thing he's aware of is that he hears all this scuttling about in the bathroom, which is right near the bedroom. And he's trying to wake his wife, who's, playing dead or as dead, not responsive at all. And you hear this countless times. And all of a sudden he finds himself going to sleep. Gets him in the morning and thinks, oh, hang on a minute. wait a minute, what happened last night? What was that? And immediately goes to look in the soap dish and it's gone. They came back for their stuff.
Oh, that's incredible, isn't it?
Well, especially for Bill remembering, because since his strokes and heart attacks, it's affected his memory. Not the memory of these things, but some of the moments. So if we've ever, he doesn't do them now. He's really not well enough to do them now. But we did in 2016. We did quite a lot of shows together, because I think it's lovely to hear from the horse's mouth, if you like, and I'll always support that. But and I would be on there to tell a lot of the story fluidly, and for him then to come in and chime in with the, really interesting meaty bits, and then to help him if he forgot where he was, which can happen. And I understand about all of that. So anyway, bless him. Yeah. So people who have had these intense experiences, where it has been lifelong, I mean, my goodness me. And you imagine, I mean, I ask every one of you out there listening to imagine what it's like to be living one life one way when actually you're living several. And then the one that you are living, you don't believe in. You don't believe any of that stuff. And then suddenly it is brought into your reality without any shadow of a doubt. Imagine what that does to such a personality, or what would it do to you if you woke up to the fact that, and it was a fact, irrefutable fact, that you were an abductee for your life. How would you feel? Yeah. And then what's quite interesting that he said to me, he said, well, Jan, he said, I might have believed that this was all a breakdown, all some aberration of my mental processes, had it not been for the fact that they continued. But this time he knew about them. Now, he didn't always remember the event, but he knew when they were coming. He knew, and then it was crazy. He would see things, oh my God, the sightings were just incredible. So yeah.
So with the other people that you've spoke to, there's nothing that connects these people in any way that you think they're a classic sort of, a prime target for these experiences. There's nothing that connects them, is there? It's not religion. It's not where you live. It's not anything. It's just out of the blue.
That's what it appears to be. I'm not sure there is some kind of overarching soul group vibrational thing going on, where birds of a feather flock together and all that stuff. And I don't mean to sound, flippant about it, but it may be that on other levels of consciousness which have nothing or very little reflection, they obviously must have some input, but very little reflection that we're aware of physically, but maybe have a big impact on our overarching choice of incarnation, where a soul group splits up over the planet. There could be 1 million or 2 of them, all with a certain frequency, and they wouldn't know each other. They just know, they might know the light if they were conscious enough. But it's very interesting, Daniela. I haven't got a definitive answer for how that can be, but the overarching soul group may be, something of a way to begin understanding this kind of thing. But it is absolutely fascinating. So I have great respect and great compassion for people who've been through, a lot of this. And, it takes a lot to pick up that phone to ring me or whoever they want to ring to say, I have had maybe since I, started the phone line, phone number, probably I can count on 2 hands in all those years, the hoax calls, and they're always drunk guys. I think there might have been a drunk girl once, but, being just stupid and, thinking they're having fun, and maybe they are, I don't know, but it's just ridiculous, of course. But everybody else, you know it's real. you know, people sometimes have said, well, what about those with mental health issues? And, you know, hey guys, just because there may be a mental health issue involved does not mean people cannot, you know, they're out the count for being an abductee or contactee. No, it doesn't go. I mean, one of the guys, I haven't ever put his interview out, and I don't know if I ever will, but interestingly, he's a Christian convert from Muslim. Very interesting mix, because you don't often hear about that person coming forward. And they're very bright. I can't remember what their degree is in, some kind of business thing. And they'd had a really kind of, for them, harrowing kind of ET thing. And I know it's not all bad, but this guy's was. So, you know, I'm not going to apologize for that it isn't all love and light for everybody's experience where they are. And because we have to deal with what is and where we are. And it's okay for the love and light ones too. But so he'd gone down the psychiatric route because he was desperate for help, because it was making him feel suicidal. It was making him feel unsafe, even with others, all kinds of things, and just not in control. And he really was in crisis. So when he finally came to meet me, and, you know, great guy, really lovely person, you could see he was damaged, you could see he was scarred, but still, what a flipping incredible thing to do, to come to me and let me put him on camera. Whether it's out there or not, it's you know, I might put bits of it out here and there in time, but it's really for him. And I said to him, you know, if you'd have had someone like me to talk to in the first place, do you think you would have gone down the medication route? Because now he's on the medication route, it's not something that he can stop. And he said, oh, you know, no, I wouldn't have gone down that route. No, he's quite sure about that.
Yeah. A lot of people in the chat have just been mentioning, have you ever interviewed or talked to Travis Walton?
No, I haven't. I met him. I was trying to interview him, actually, back in about 2013. I was at the American International UFO Conference, but he was a bit tied up, a bit busy, so didn't manage to interview him. I did get Bob Dean, though, and someone who's non-personal grata at the moment, but not in my book, and that's Stan Romanek, Bob Brown, can't remember who else. Oh, yeah, Devara Thunderbeat. She's on the album, the EKLECTIA album, which is an album I produced last year. Was it last year? No, the year before. Where are we? We're 2020. My God, it's gone so fast. 2018. Yeah, I put together an album featuring experiences, musician, singer-songwriters who had experiences, and this hasn't been done before as a compilation album. So that's what we did. I don't know whether you have that, but there's the album. Oh, there we go. Album cover.
Got it.
Yeah.
I can see that. Yeah, I didn't get that one. Sorry, no.
It's on the website. I sent you the website link.
Yeah, links are in the description.
Yeah, it's great because it's featuring music of all kinds, because the genre is in the person, not the music. So it's not all rock and roll or not all classical. There's lots of all of that in it, but it also features like little short sound bites of most of the guys and girls talking about their experiences. So that's amazing, as well as their songs. And it's got one or two interviews with cutting edge people like Chris Bledsoe, Grant Cameron, and a couple of the biolocation team who are dowsers, who I'm hooking in with and doing some work with, and hope to have a series out called The Dowsing Detectives, which is absolutely extraordinary, because they were working with actually archaeology and ancient archaeology, and then they began finding anomalies, and then they found that those anomalies were extraterrestrial in nature, and that led them over a good few years to actually strike up a relationship with some of what people might know as the Federation. Anyway, it's very exciting stuff.
Right. Yeah, look forward to hearing more about that. So can I ask, with these the abductees, contactees, what are the more the positive experiences? Because I imagine there is some.
Oh yeah, there's quite a few people have experienced healings, and if people want to look at the free organization, that's Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, or I may have got that anagram title wrong there, but it's free anyway. Ray Hernandez started it with Mary Rodwell, who's does a lot of fantastic experience and research work out in Australia. She is English. Edgar Mitchell was part of it, and they've got people like Dr. Rudy Shield. Some amazing scientists are on board as well, and they produced a huge tome. Can't remember if it was last year or the year before now, and they did a huge survey and research. And I can't remember if it's about 40% or perhaps I shouldn't say what the percentage, because I can't actually remember now offhand, but a big percentage of people, experiences, have spoken of, much more than any negative experience, of healings, profound healings. And to talk about Chris Bledsoe, just as a case in point, his experiences are extraordinary. And he's a guy from the Carolinas in America who didn't believe in anything like this either, comes from fairly fundamentalist religious background and hunter, and he thought nothing of shooting a lovely old big bear, and dream of doing anything like that now. But that was his society, that was his culture. And then in 2007, after many years of very debilitating experience of Crohn's disease, he was a contractor. He built properties and was extremely well, very, very successful. Anyway, with this disease, which became life-threatening, the business failed, and he nearly died on 2 occasions, various reasons. And in 2007, he was really at his wit's end. His family were also really, at their wit's end, because he got a young family, didn't know how he was going to make money, all the rest of that. So anyway, he'd had a couple of contractors finish up a job, and they were really happy. And they just said, look, let's just go and do some fishing. So he went with his son and these 2 guys. He didn't want to do any fishing. So he said, look, guys, I'm just going to go out and have a little walk up here. It was a little wood area. And anyway, long story short, is that, and he'd been on his way up into this field, which was woods, which was just very close by, very close. He'd been calling out, if you like, crying out to God or whatever, to really relieve him of life, because he couldn't stand it anymore, and he just couldn't cope. He was at the end, and he began seeing what he thought it was a son, and then there was another one, and then there was another one. And anyway, so after what seemed minutes, he ran down to the river where these guys were, and his son wasn't there. And they were looking at him, and they were going, well, where the hell have you been? He said, and he thought it was just a few minutes. He'd actually been gone, I don't know if it was 2 hours or 3, I can't remember now. All these stories you hear, and then, but he's got lots of interviews out there. And basically, they'd healed him from his Crohn's disease.
Wow.
His Crohn's disease was no more. Now, in the preceding years, or following years, I should say, in the following years, so since 2007, he's had so much to deal with, getting his head round, a bit like Bill, because that rootin' tootin' hunting fishing mentality was no longer part of the man. And not because somebody changed his mind, but because he didn't feel it in his soul, in his heart.
Right.
If I can say that. He felt compassion for the animals. He felt hurt, and now he looks after them and he paints. It's like that right brain side gets activated. It's really quite exciting in a way, because it brings in, for men, a lot more of the feminine, divine feminine, if you want to talk in those terms, that aspect that is a natural facet of all of us. Like we have the divine masculine in all of us too, and that is normal. It's just if it's out of balance or we don't recognize it and try and shut it off, that it becomes a problem. So he has become much more engaged with what people might recognize in the field as the feminine aspect. Nothing feminine about him at all, I might say. It's just that these facets of his compassionate nature have been activated. And not that he didn't have compassion before, it's just that it now extends beyond his family. And that's something, So he had a lot of trouble with his family and his wife accepting things was very tough for her, very tough for them. They've now come round to some degree. I don't know if all the community have, but because he's the kind of guy he is, he's got integrity, he's honest, he's just telling a story, always been a good family guy, all of that people, have accepted more or less who he is. And so he had that healing. And I know of people who've had other incredible healings. I'm trying to think of them off the top of my mind. I can't, but there's been a lot. Now, Chris was also saying he's had a lot of paranormal. I'll just mention this because it's also interesting if people don't know. But often hand in hand with the ET scenario goes a heightened paranormal sensibility and also impact. Why that is, we're not all quite sure, and maybe other people can tell me about that. But there was, a really great influx of paranormal activity into the house. His whole family now have seen things, and incredible things have happened. And because of that, it's really made him a much more, I would say, whole person, and his family too. And he said we had 5 years of real darkness, coming to terms with it, and because it takes us a long time to acclimatize to things that are not in our experience. And he now says, because of his proximity to the craft on many occasions now, that he's got rheumatoid arthritis, which he puts down to just being in the field, but no more Crohn's, from which he was nearly dying at one point, which is, quite an astonishing thing.
That is, yeah, definitely.
So there have been a lot of healings, and I do, if people are really interested in hearing much more about that, get the free book. It's it's a reference book. It's absolutely wonderful, and I haven't read it in quite a while, so you'll have to excuse me not being able to bring up a lot more of examples of that, but there are loads, absolutely loads.
I'll put a link up in the description if you tell me later.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Remember, someone saying, hi, Ray, a lot of experiences become vegan. Have you heard that?
No. No. I'm not saying that's not the case. I haven't heard it as a specific thing. I'm vegetarian, been vegetarian for 100 years, but that's nothing to do with my experiences. That's to do with them.
But that could make sense. People have more empathy and more.
Well, of course, listen, it could be. I just haven't heard that, and I'm not saying that it isn't. It just may be something that has come up in our chats, because it's not often something that comes up as normally it's stuff about how to deal with the family and how they can process the experiences, how they can feel okay about that, and to discuss how things are moving, because nearly all of these people have other aspects or facets of their nature come forward or quite prominent. And I asked one guy, and he was a sort of a slender chap, not a big guy at all, and I said to him, I'm betting that you have some attribute or other that on the whole you would say is more developed than other regular people that you know. He said, yeah, he said, I guess, and most people can't really think of anything until you give them a few examples. And he did quite a physical job. I think he was part of a cleaning company at the time or something like that. Anyway, they did industrial stuff. And he said that his kind of superpower was that he had, and as I say, he was a small person, but said he had more stamina than sometimes 3 men put together, and that he could do this job super well. And people would often send him in or said, so-and-so will go and do it, and he said that incredible amount of power and ability to maintain it seemed to be part of what came out of his experiences. Other people have very interesting outcomes. Some experience quite a lot of deja vu, and also a kind of, perhaps deja vu isn't the right word, I'm going to say kind of prophetic element, which can freak them out a bit, understandably. Yeah. I know one of Bill's major things was that, and I think this was, just trying to think how, so he'd been, awakened for a little while now, but he suddenly, the night before, on September the 10th, 2011, he suddenly said to his wife, book a holiday. We need to go. We need to go now. And she said, what, what's going on? He said, go and book a holiday and go and book somewhere right now. America's going to be attacked and nothing will ever be the same again, or the world won't be the same again.
Wow.
And he didn't know what he was saying. He didn't know what that meant. And he just had this impulse to get his family away. I mean, they're only in Wales, and they went further into Wales. So anyway, the logic of that is that maybe he was trying to get away from even the thought of that. And so they went up to a caravan, and the caravan wasn't ready. So it was dirty. I think it was dirty. So it hadn't been cleaned. So they gave him an upgrade one, which had television in, and he saw why no staff were around, because they were all watching the TV in the early morning of what was going on 9/11. Wow. And it kind of freaked him out, because he thought, oh my God, it's real. And it's like another piece of information that I found. He told me about it, and I corroborated it by finding it. It so unnerved him. And so he said, oh my God, it's real. And it's not that he didn't believe his experiences were real. Oh, for sure he did. It's just, oh my God, it's real out there. It's really real. And we couldn't work again for another few weeks, because it so rocked his mental boat that he had to, take a break. It really unnerved him. Yeah, so, being an experiencer, Bill's case is extreme, and I know it inside out. So that's, and it's an incredible British case. So that's why, I've talked about it a bit and spent the time I've done, because it's important. I think his is probably one of the most important British cases we've got, and who knows about it? Not me.
I'm definitely going to get the book and have a read of it. Do you know, last time we were on the researchers report, and we were talking afterwards. I know that we both had to go, and we had so much to say. And you mentioned something called the Christ something. And I think we were talking about reactions that people do. And I don't know if you remember, I had a guest on who, and she's actually in the chat tonight, who says Jesus to get rid of. She had an encounter and saying Jesus got rid of that thing. Now, do you remember mentioning it? The Christ something you called it, maybe.
If it's what I'm thinking is when I had this is interesting. I had and it feeds right into what you're going to say, but I'll preface it with an encounter story, because it kind of is interesting. I had a lady, and I think she was 85. After the documentary went out in 2013, I had a lot of contact, a lot of calls and stuff, and people just wanting to tell me their story, get it off the chest, not do anything else about it. And, I'm going to hang up now because the wife is coming home. Don't want to talk about it again. Just needed you to hear me. So, I had a lot of that going on, and that was fine. And then this lady was the same. She lived up in Norfolk, 85. I don't know if she's even around now, because it was, 2013. And she said, I just had to tell you, she said, I've had, my family don't know anything about this. She said, but I've had experiences with reptilians all my life. And she didn't want to go into it, because she was on, again, a short call. Couldn't stay on the phone long, because in case anybody came in. But she said, and I had one come and see me, she said, and so this would be when she was about 80. And she said, this being manifested and said, you are mine. And she said, oh no, she said, I belong. I can't remember if she said Christ or Jesus, but with that, it just disappeared. And I'll also say that I've had an experience of this too, not within a reptilian, but I had when I was going through my training as a therapist. I don't know if this was an intentional thing from the therapist, from the trainer, or this was an opportunist circumstance that something dark thought, oh, yippee, we've got one here, we'll hook this one in. I don't know what the truth of that matter is, but so I'd done quite a lot of work in that day, and I was really tired. But I was going to do this one other session, and this was for me. I've been working with other people, and it really uses the nervous system up a lot, this work, and that's something to be aware of, so not to overstretch yourself. And you know, this was a good lesson for me. Never again did I do this. And so work when you're absolutely on your knees tired in this field, very important. And as she was working on me, all of a sudden I could see in my inner eye, I didn't see it externally, I got my eyes closed, this entity, black, dark entity, and it was in a process of taking me over, taking over my whole being. And so I don't know what would have happened. I don't know if I had lost the fight, whether I would have, I think the body would have maintained and something would have been using it for whatever nefarious purposes, I don't know. But it wouldn't have been me. I would have been gone. And whether it would have been an actual, like a death, I really don't know. But I came to a point where I was so exhausted, I could feel myself beginning to slip, beginning to lose the strength to maintain myself. And anyway, I came to a critical point, and I thought, this is it. It's make or break. And at that point, I'm not religious at all. I absolutely do believe that there was a person called Jesus and Buddha and Mary and a lot of these masters, not because of the Bible or anything like that, but because of other work and stuff. And I believe that there are many layers, like layers of a rock, rings of a tree, strata of consciousness, and that like tree rings, you can access higher facets of that consciousness, which is incredibly powerful. And the Christ consciousness is one of those layers. And we don't know what the others are, when, you know, unless you're a master or whatever. So we're schooled with Christ or God is where you go. So I don't know. People don't tend to use, perhaps they don't use God so much, they use Christ because it feels more human, more accessible. So I just called on the Christ energy, and I said, I don't have the ability to do this, and I'm staying. It wasn't me planning to go and, you know, evacuate my body. That wasn't the deal. And anyway, so this thing blitzed out, and I was absolutely. I was quite a state of trauma, and the therapist had no idea. She sent me home, and I'm telling you this because the aftermath of shock, of psychic attack and trauma can be intense. And it was, when I got home, I shouldn't have driven. I wasn't really safe to drive, but there was nobody else to take me home. And she was completely unaware. So I went home. I didn't have a call from her or anything. And I was ill. I was sick, had diarrhea, my whole system was in shock. And that lasted 3 days. And then I started recovering. And that was a fantastic lesson, and, you know, a real eye-opener if you needed one, if I needed one, about the reality of these other forces who are only too pleased to zip in, and God knows what I would have been, and certainly wouldn't be talking to you, I'm sure, if I'd become something else with this other being. So the Christ consciousness seems to be a real great energy line to bring in, and different people will have different reasons for using it, calling on it, but I think it's helpful when you've got an idea of an energy form like that seems tangible to you.
Yeah, your own belief, whatever that is.
Yeah, and you know, the thing is, I know that when we are all strong enough and a little bit more educated, we won't need any Christ energy to call on. We'll be able to do it just ourselves like that. And, you know, normally I can do that. I can sort my own stuff out. And I've had some quite challenging stuff to sort out, and I've more or less been able to do it. But, you know, as the stronger your light is, the stronger the forces are that will come, you know, because they match, obviously, to, to the challenge. And so you just need to be a little bit careful. That's all.
Yeah.
But I think that's what you were alluding to.
I think it was, yeah. And someone asked as well, Mary-Ann, Magic 7, have you had a personal, supernatural, strange experience apart from the one you just told us?
Oh God, yes. Yeah, quite a few.
Do you want to share one of them?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I'll share a really interesting one because it's very physical to me. So I was still working with the AMASH project. The AMASH project closed in late 2015. So this would have been around about, this might have been, I think this would have been around about April 2012. I had 3 big events happen to me. It's like since I started the AMASH project, I began attracting lots of things that were trying to stop me doing what I'm doing. And this was an interesting one. So I was bunking down at the guy at my colleagues who was doing the editing. And I was bunking down on their sofa, got the duvet over me, and I'm always a late to bed person. I'd had my book out and it's about 2 a.m. and I just put the book down, and the room wasn't a huge room. It was probably, I don't know, 12, something like that, 12-foot square, let's say. And there was a little, where I was facing, which was to the center of the room, at the end of the bed, at the end of the sofa was, it was a small house, was a door into the kitchen, and beyond that was a door into a small conservatory area, which was the editing room. Anyway, so and there was a little red light in the corner, which was always there. It was the camera looking outside at the cars. Just that's what they'd had put up. So that was a feature. I knew that and could see it. And it was that, and that's a very small point of light. Anyway, I started noticing that this point of light was no longer a point. It was more like a tiddlywink size. You know, kind of. Where are we about that? And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then the room seemed to get very, very black. The center of the room seemed to get very black. Now, the center of the room I'm trying to think, it probably wouldn't be much more than 8 foot away from me, if that, maybe 8 foot, not much more. And just to give you a sense of the dimension, the context of things. And the room was fairly dark. It wasn't black dark, but it was fairly dark. So this center of the room, when it got black, I thought, you know, I was squinting my eyes. I was lying on my side, squinting my eyes, thinking, is it going black? What's going on? And then out of this black portal popped a man, a human man. I believe he was human. I don't believe he was ET dressed up or anything. I believe it was a military operation, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So this guy was incredibly slender. I'm 5'4", and I don't think he would have been much more than 5'5" or 6. And he was a very skinny kind of guy, and he had very high set shoulders. You know, those people that look like they've got a coat hanger in their jacket. So very low neck, you know, not much neck. And he was all in black, and the black was very black, and it was some kind of covering where I couldn't see the features, like, you know, you could see my nose and the eyes and that, but you could see this blackness and you can see the outline of the ears. And I was looking, and he began walking toward me, and I was like, I mean, if I could have opened, you know, if I dared open my eyes, I'd have been like saucers. And I thought, what the hell? You know, there was no sound, there was no smell, there was just the visual, and I didn't get any sensation of anything else at the moment. And I was aware that I might be in danger. I don't know why. I thought maybe he's come to kill me, maybe he's come to do some harm. And as I lay on my side, you know, when you kind of are not wanting anyone to see you've got your eyes open, but they are halfway open under your eyelashes like that. So that I was watching him, and he came right over to me. So I'm lying on my right, and he came right over to me. Within about that distance, within about 1.5 feet of my head. And as he did so, I got this huge electric shock. and it went through my body, and I daren't move. I was completely conscious, by the way. I hadn't fallen asleep. I wasn't even gone to doze stage. Nothing. I was wide awake. And he seemed to maintain that thing of just looking at me like this. I mean, it probably wasn't even a foot away. And someone said, oh, he's scanning you, or you were having a download. I wasn't having a download, I can tell you that. Maybe he might have been reading my mind. I don't know what that was, but I didn't feel anything except the electric shock. And then when he, after a few seconds, decided, okay, she's not going to get up, she's terrified, that's all right. He got up, and as he got up, it's like this. I had an elastic band. It was like an elastic band. I just want to show you this. You know how you snap it, dink, and it goes like that. And there was almost like, there wasn't a sound, but almost like there was. And it expanded and snapped like that away from me. And it's like my field snapped back. Really weird. Never had anything like that in my life. And so his field was completely black. And I believe this was a human. I believe it was a military op. I believe, perhaps we were doing a bit too well and they didn't want us getting any of the information out that we were getting out, or didn't want me talking to certain people. I don't know. But I watched where he went, and he went into the kitchen, into that. And then I never saw him again. And I really, really didn't want to follow him. I didn't feel that was wise. My karate isn't up to what it used to be. And in the morning, when people came down, I went, oh, God, did you hear anything? Nobody heard anything. It was just me. And then there was someone upstairs said, I'm going to ask them. I'm going to see if they heard anything. And on my way out of the room, I went through obviously through the door jamb. But as I just stopped a moment under the door frame to say something else to my colleague, I suddenly felt, this was incredible, like a shower of golden, healing, beautiful, balm light, like protection and love. And oh, it was absolutely breathtaking. It was beautiful. I went, oh my God, wow. And nobody else could feel it. So I guess it was just, to recalibrate my field or something after it had been shocked. And it was fantastic. And anyway, I went to ask this other person if they'd heard anything. Of course, nobody had seen anything, nobody had heard anything. It was just me. And then I did an interview with a guy called Stuart Neal, who had severe damage, injury from stepping on a landmine and having a brain injury from that. And he contacted me and said that, because I mentioned this on camera, I can't even remember where at some point. And he said, I know what that was. That was a glimmer man, and I was one, so I know. And I said, well, I don't know about that. And he said, and he let me interview him. I mean, bless him. How amazing was that? Because he got severe brain damage. Mm. But we managed to do an interview with him, and I just think that's incredibly brave. Anyway, he was a lifelong abductee, and so were his family. Absolutely unbelievable. But what he explained to me was that he'd been part of a special group, and you're only ever in that group for about 2 years, where they were tasked, obviously it's an ops, black ops kind of thing. This is British. This is in England. Going into people's houses, doing what they needed to do, going and taking their people's computers, going and doing things to their other operations, whatever the remit was to do to that person. I mean, they were talking about civilians generally as well. So I think this was an operation against me. I do. I don't know what came of that, by the way. I don't know what happened. I don't know if we lost, my colleague would say we'd lost material, but I don't know if we actually ever did. But anyway, it did freak me out a little bit. So that was fairly unusual. And I was, really amazed that Stuart was willing to talk to me about his experience of especially being a glimmer man, but the way he described how they operated. And I'm trying to remember the time frame when he would have been in operation, and I can't remember it, but I bet you any money it would be something like the 90s, and he was saying about this invisibility cloak that they would have. I mean, a whole thing that they would use. So when they would go into a house, I mean, normally they'd expect the person to be gone. They'd have done their research. But if a person happened to be there, they wouldn't be seeing them. The occupant wouldn't see them. And if they suddenly became aware of something, like something was being taken of theirs and they could see this thing being moved, they would just shove alcohol down them and leave them, in that way. I mean, shocking, isn't it? Yeah. So that's what some of the Brits are doing. Anyway, but how wonderful of him. And bless him, he even offered me protection. How lovely was that? I mean, gosh, bless him. So
before, how do we protect ourselves? What are some things we can do?
Well, one of the things that I do a lot if I feel threatened or I'm not feeling safe, one of the first things I'll do is just visualize, and our ability to just imagine something for ourselves is really powerful. And I know a lot of people just don't believe that or don't think this is the case, but I'm telling you it's true, and there's lots of evidence to support this. You'll have to ask me another time about that because I'd have to get it together, but is in a bubble of light. Absolutely a bubble of light. And that's like an immediate thing. And also when you intend that bubble of light is safety and protection around you, you also give it, what I say to people is also give it a mirrored exterior, so that anything coming to you that is not for your highest good bounces off back to where it came from with a force of 10 times with love, because that's their karmic lesson. Thank you very much. No, you can, and stand, sit with that, stand with it. It is really, really powerful. Another thing that I often do with people in therapy work, when they've got links, karmic links, old patterns and ties, and even reincarnational links to past lives, is to, it can be people, it can be things, it can be even concepts and ideas that are anchored into the body causing issues and problems. I literally get them to, I mean, there's lots of different ways you can do this, but a very simple one is just to, if it's a person, for example, is just to send that person love and light. And I know that can be really hard, but see the ties that bind you. So the rope, the thing, and if you don't see it, just give yourself permission to see it and then cut it or burn it or freeze it or do whatever you want to separate yourself. A good thing is to put yourself in a hot air balloon or them and let them move away from right out of your vision. And you may need to do that several times because sometimes it's so ingrained in us, so habituated in us to be hurt, to be in pain, to be in fear, that it takes a lot for us humans to accept that we can be different and have a different experience. But when we do this fundamental stuff, this very simple, free stuff, because you're just doing this, or you can pay for a session with me and I'll take you through it. But you can do this very easily yourself, and it's very safe. And the reason it's safe is because you are not intending any harm. If you start intending harm and stuff like that, well, you'll have to face the consequences of that. You'll just get a ping back yourself, because that's the way the world works. But if you just, the idea is to create a sense of detachment from it, because when you don't have any emotional charge on it, that is what brings it to you. The emotional charge generally is like a little battery, and we've all been there. Listen, hands up, I've been there too. And I have to talk myself out of it and talk myself down and get myself back and straight again. And it is quite hard, quite tough for us to do it. But those are a couple of things. And sometimes, if it's people or places or things, you can, there's nothing we can't do in our imagination. Put them all in a black bag and put them out in the rubbish. Put them in the incinerator with blessings. Just go, oh, you're not part of my life anymore. That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you for the experience. Don't freaking need it anymore. Thank you. There's lots of little tools, absolutely loads, and we can do a session on that in more in depth.
It seems that the more we connect with ourselves, the more vulnerable we can become as well to these. maybe vulnerable is not the right word, but we kind of seem to be opening ourselves up more to frequencies and vibrations.
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced that a lot. You know, it's like the more I've done the MASH project and now the ET newsroom, now I've come. I haven't been in the, you know, public so much in the last sort of couple of years. I've been doing lots of different things behind the scenes, but and the public thing will come up again in the next probably 2 years. Lots of projects in the pipeline, but certainly in those earlier days, oh my God, I mean, wow, lots of things. And you do need to be able to deflect, you know, get your martial art head on and just go, no, you know, just stand in your power, put yourself in the light, and, you know, you are worthy. You deserve the best. And you really do. You are here as an incredible, you know, warrior being in whatever, you know, field you choose. And stepping into your power is no mean feat, let me tell you. I mean, God, I've been bashed and hauled over the coals, and I no doubt it will happen again. And I get myself out there a little bit more. And, you know, but, you know, those people tend to hurt themselves more than they hurt me. And, you know, that's for them to deal with at the end of the day. You know, that's their business. That's their stuff, not mine. So it's a bit of a trick getting to that mindset where you can just go, that's their stuff, you know. And, you know, I remember hearing, I don't know whether it's from a film or something like that, just recently, someone said about, they went up to someone and told them how much they loved them. Yeah, I think it was a school ground thing. And then as they walked away, they heard the girl, in this case, making fun of them, going, hoo, did you hear just what, you know, really ridiculous and really belittling them. And this person came to them and said, did you know that? Did you hear that? What she just said about you? Even though you gave your honest, open heart to her. He said, yeah, but I love her. That's my business. She doesn't love me. That's her business.
Yeah. That's a great way
to
be. Yeah.
Wow. I'm not quite like that all the time. Don't get me wrong. I'm working. You know, we are all a work in progress. And that's the exciting thing. We can change at any time we decide we want to. And there are many, you know, simple tools just from deep breathing, you know, just taking 10. Do that. God, okay. I'm not always very good at that, but.
I sometimes have to take 20, you know, because.
Yeah. Half an hour.
Yeah, definitely. So what are you working on now then? Let's go back to the dowsing, the gentlemen that are doing the dowsing. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to put a little shout out for a guy called Jeffrey Crockford, who is the lead of the bilocation team that's been going since quite a long time, since 2006 or something. And I met them through a guy called Peter, who lives in Tunbridge Wells, who I've been working with just even yesterday, who's a dowser. And he said, and again, contacted me after the show. So that was one good thing about the documentary, crap though it was. It brought some really lovely people into my life, very interesting people who could see through the nonsense, you know, and said, well, I guess that's not how you wanted that to go. So isn't it great when people can do that and support you?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was great. And Jeffrey was diagnosed with a brain tumor in early December. So he's out of action at the moment. So I know you don't know what he looks like, but if you could just put a loving light out through me, through to Jeff Crockford, that would be absolutely great, because I know no energy is ever wasted. And so when I met Peter, this is really interesting, guys, because I hadn't got into dowsing before. Didn't really know. I knew what it was, but I hadn't really had much experience of it. And the experience I'd had didn't really interest me. But when Peter said, you need to speak to these guys, and he said, because they're dealing with ancient archaeology, finding ET, and now they've got this ET. I mean, I went, really? What? So I went to meet Jeff up in Hertfordshire. And when I met him, this sprightly 80-year-old, very vital. And on his front lawn was a pegged outline. And I've got lots of footage that I will start putting out. I'm going to try and get a documentary together of their work along with the Dowsing detectives as a series in due course. And I hope Jeff is going to stay on the planet, please, Jeff, so I can do a bit more with him, with you. And there was this pegged outline of something I couldn't quite see. And I said, oh, that's interesting. What's that? He said, oh, it's a craft. I went, oh, okay. What kind of a craft? He said, oh, it's a few miles up. We've got the holographic projection down. I went, holographic projection, really? He said, yeah. And then he said, anyway, come through. Went up to the back lawn, which is quite a bit bigger, and there was the solar system in real time, in relative exact size, and he was. It's like, you know, this is a huge step for me to, you know, and for you guys, I'll know this is big because it blew me away. And I thought, no, really? And he was telling me about things that were going on in the solar system. So there was the sun there, and there's the earth. And he said, no, over there. And he was going over and he was dowsing it. He was using rods. And the L rods, do I have one to show you? Well, you know what an L rod is, guys, don't you? Do you guys know? Yeah. All right. I have some. I didn't get to use them yesterday, but I had them with me yesterday, and I'll tell you about that trip in a minute. I go out and do quite a lot of field trips still, but you don't hear about those, but you will do eventually. And he was showing me the craft that were coming into our solar system, coming and going at amazing speed, and he was following relatively down. And they created something called an astroscope, which is a simple thing, which I won't describe what it is at the moment, but it's a relatively simple device that allows you to scale down. It like takes a holographic snapshot, what it is, scale it down. And so then you can see it in a room, you can see it on a field, and then you can get down into the real detail of a craft. For example, you can go and look into the lockers, go and check out who's on the craft. You can check out the blood groups, the types, everything down to the nth degree. It's an amazing tool, absolutely extraordinary tool. And so that blew me away.
Yeah,
that absolutely blew me away. And then when Comet Ison came around, which when was that? Was that 2014? I'm trying to think when Comet Ison was. Anyway, when Comet Ison was around, I said to the guys, have you thought about looking at that one? And they said, oh, no, we'll have a look at that. Anyway, so then there's this heap of research done on Ison. And what they found out was that Ison was being mined by certain factions of ET. I mean, when I say ET, and we're just talking about people who are not on this planet. I don't know. They'll know what kind of ET. There's a report done on all kinds of things. And anyway, one of the things that was really interesting is that Ison was on a course that looked like it was getting so close, you know, it would get close to the sun that it would burn it up. And these guys were dowsing the trajectory and could see this. And then they said, oh, look, they've put a shield up and they've course corrected. And then guess what? The next day on the news, they said, oh, Comet Ison seems to have course corrected. What, really? A comet can course correct itself? I don't friggin' think so. It was intelligently done.
That's an incredible series that you do with them. I can't wait to see that. What you?
Oh, you know, that's going to be part of it, and I just hope that Jeff stays on the planet a bit longer. Anyway, so
send him more positive energy to keep with us, stay with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just what I did yesterday, I did a field trip with Peter in Tunbridge Wells, and you may, and this is another just way the tool can be used, and it's not, it is kind of ET related, but sort of not. It's on the side. But what happened in August, on August 18th, 2019, in Tunbridge was there was a young lady called Sabrina Gocha who died. We're not quite sure whether she was murdered or not. And basically, the body was found on the 19th. She had her demise on the 18th. And but there's a period of time when we don't know where she went or how she ended up where she ended up. And she was a local girl. She was a photographer. She got a degree. She was into the music business, and she was a popular girl, and she was a professional photographer. She was a bright spark, and suddenly she ends up dead. She wasn't a drug user particularly or anything like that. So there were no other, reasons that she might have died. So Peter and I, at Peter's suggestion, went over the area. Now, I was sort of holding the camera or the phone whilst Peter was talking, so I didn't get a chance to do much rodding myself or dowsing. And it was absolutely extraordinary, and you'll see this. I might put this piece out, actually, because it's not a long piece. But we were testing whether we were right in the direction. So, for example, we'd cross a road, and I'd be saying to Sabrina, okay, sweet, where are we? And we're not talking necessarily to her spirit. We're picking up particles of her, because the way Peter works is extraordinary. He is able to come up with a code which is normally color orientated, and that has a numerical value. Sometimes he'll just work with a number, like a barcode in a way, if you like, and the colors and or both together. This time he didn't have time to paint up the colors, so he just had the numbers. So he had her alive. The codes are different for if you're alive or if you're dead. Yeah, so and off we went. So he was holding in his hand and had one rod, and the rod would be pointing. So as we were going, and he said, this is how we found a site called Project Y. They call it Project Y because it was to do with the, started them off on their big UFO realization and re-education of really the fact that they're here, or certainly visiting, and have been for many millions probably of years. And then it looked like it was going in that direction, but we weren't sure. So he actually faced the opposite direction, and he said, okay, so we're trying to follow the pathway, remember? And suddenly it spun around, and he said, okay, just checking that we were on the right direction. And off we went. And we did this by process of elimination. And sometimes it would take us to, like in one case, Wellington Rocks, an outcrop of rocks, a beautiful area around there, where she was clearly just looking over. Now, was she had a camera with her? Was she taking photographs? This would be about 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning. We don't know what she was doing up there. We think that we've picked up that there was a link with somebody in a car. Now, whether that was just a casual good morning or whether there was something else more nefarious going on, we don't know. We know she left the area which has the car park in it to another place, and so on and so on and so on. We actually got to the end of where she was not reading anymore. So it was like she was at a property, and that's where she ended up. And then, so that took a lot of work, believe it or not, a lot of traipsing. A lot of this field work is footwork, and you're out there just tramping, and it's not very glamorous.
It kind of feels like a physical remote viewing in a sense.
Yeah, it is remote viewing. It is absolutely like that. Yeah, it is. It is absolutely. And Peter uses the term remote viewing because he'll map dowse it. And tonight he gave me a couple of catch-up calls to look at we Google map the area, and he's very good at map dowsing. I'm rubbish at it. But he was looking at Madeleine McCann. What he's found out about Madeleine McCann is not what anybody else is looking at, but won't talk about that, just as another can of worms. But it's all just amazing stuff. Now, Peter, when he started doing this, which is about 2003 or 4, had no knowledge of it before. It was only through doing some family history research that he came across another guy who was a dowser, and who said, I'll come down and we'll have a look at your area. And it turns out Tunbridge Wells areas are absolutely saturated with amazing stuff. And maybe talk about that at another time, because it is just layers and layers and layers of it, and some of it's quite challenging to take on board. Oh my goodness. but a lot of this is ET a lot of the intelligence is ET related. It's or that's what he picks up. The guys I've been working with, one is a retired physicist of the biolocation team. And although they work slightly differently from Peter, whenever he's given them codes to work with, I mean, they have worked together on occasion as well, but they're just in different, geographical locations. It always works. And they said, this is really phenomenal. And he's been tested time and time again, even by one of the main British museums, which they now don't recognize. I said, oh, now I'd be filming it behind him. But so because we're using these other sensors, this is what seems to be birthing in us more awareness that we've got these other finer sensors which can be trained like a laser to pick up information. And dowsing is just a tool. It's just one of them. But it can be really, really intensively specific and incredibly detailed.
Yeah.
So the Dowsing Detectives is one of the projects, and I still have a case files little book to roll out, which is going to be some of my interviews. Instead of on camera, they're going to be just in book form. And I've just set up, although it's been on the books for sort of 2 years, we're finally able to do it. I've got an American colleague called Cara Fay. She's amazing. She's very much into the spirituality of things, the divine feminine, and an incredible journey she's had. And we've been speaking about collaborating for quite a long time, and certainly the last 2 years, but now we're able to do that. So come sort of the first quarter of the year is laying the foundations, and the second quarter, about mid-year, we'll be setting up the projects, and then we'll be starting the work on them. So that'll be joint US, UK, and we'll be definitely going further afield. And there's everything in there from sort of road trips planned, and those road trips will be field trips, stroke road trips, because the idea is that we'll be stopping, this is in Europe as well, we'll be stopping in places to speak to experiences on the hoof. So get them to come into either our little studio on the hoof, or we'll just have a camera and set up somewhere, and we'll be doing that in various towns and cities and bringing that to a wider audience, hopefully, and that'll be really exciting. So we can feed that back to you, Daniela.
Definitely, yeah, that sounds exciting. Well, look, definitely have to have you back on the show, because we just seem to be scratching the surface always. There's always something else to talk about, and we've covered quite a lot tonight. So I think we're almost up to our 2 hours as well. I think we've done.
Can you believe it?
I know.
I hope you've enjoyed it, folks.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Definitely going to invite you back on, Joanna. Everyone, I've put all the links for Joanna in the description below, so please check out the ET Newsroom and the EKLECTIA album. You can actually go to the page and you can listen to clips of the things on there, and they are really interesting and fun, as well. So
it's EKLECTIA without the other K, but or at the so EKLECTIA, really from eclectic, because it's just such an incredibly, incredibly diverse album. So EKLECTIA it is. And anyway, have a look, folks, and let us know what you think. Read 44. Let me know what you think of that. It's an amazing story, and just remember, for anybody who's a naysayer out there, how much courage it takes to do this, and also for what Daniela does and what other people do to get this material out to you. Doesn't matter whether we're doing it from our living room or from where we're doing it. It takes time and commitment. And so thank you, Daniela, and to everybody who's listening too, because hopefully you'll talk about it and it'll make a difference and open some people up. So good for you.
Yeah, and thanks to you as well for what you're doing, for providing that support, just that ear, even just for support.
Yeah, if anybody, I'm still doing that. I just, I'm not out there so much publicly at the moment, but the phone number is still the same, and that's 0795 1752 813, and it's on the website. So
Brilliant. I hope I haven't just lost you there. I think you've just frozen up. Okay, folks, I'm going to go.
The EKLECTIA. Oh, no, I saw them both. Okay.
Sorry, you've frozen. I was just saying goodbye to everyone. Come over to Bigfoot Odyssey tomorrow night. We'll be on there with Kerry. We're doing the researchers report. We've got Georgia Workman on, who's the founder, or I think so, of the Bigfoot Dogman Information Project. So we're going to be talking about Dogman, which
Sounds great.
Yeah, I'm fascinated about that. So thanks, everyone.
I've got a story for you about that as well.
Yeah. Catch up with you all soon. Thanks a lot and good night.